Welcome to the public hearing on inclusion in the agricultural district, Tuesday, July 6, 2021. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
District 1, Legislator Montgomery.
Present.
District 2, Legislator Gould.
Present.
District 4, Legislator Nasarino. District 5, Legislator Albano.
Present.
District 6, Legislator Young.
Present.
District 7, Legislator Castellano.
Present.
District 8, Legislator Sage.
Present.
District 9, Legislator Sullivan.
Present.
District 3, Chairwoman Ann-Nesbitt.
Present. Number 3 is reading of public notice.
Notice is hereby given that pursuant to Article 25AA of the Agriculture and Markets Law of the State of New York, Section 303B, that one or more requests have been received by the Putnam County Legislature for inclusion of predominantly viable agricultural land within Putnam County Certified Agricultural District. Further notice is hereby given that the Putnam County Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board has considered the request for inclusion and reported with which parcels for inclusion would serve the public interest by assisting in maintaining a viable agricultural industry within the district. Further notice is hereby given that the parcels requested for inclusion are Town of Kent, Sunshine Farm, Inc., Sunshine and Joseph Greco, tax map number 19.1-36, 6.0 acres, total acreage of 6. Town of Putnam Valley, Valley View Farm, Grace de Rivera and Alexander Kaspar, tax map number 72.1-50, 113.10 acres, and tax map number 83.1-11, 60.40 acres, total acreage of 173.50. Town of Southeast, White House Farm, Michael Chicago, tax map number 56.18-1-34.1, 15.04 acres, total acreage 15.04, total acreage in petitions 194.54. Further notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held on Tuesday, July 6, 2021 at 6:45 p.m. in the Historic Courthouse, Palm, New York, to consider these requests for inclusion and the recommendations of the Putnam County Agriculture and Farmland Protection Board by order of the Putnam County Legislature.
Number 4 is procedure for a comment on public hearing. The members of the Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board have visited all the parcels that have been requested to be included into the agricultural district and reported which, if any, parcels should be included. These recommendations have been considered and approved by our Physical Services Committee. Anyone wishing to speak regarding the petitions for inclusion into the agricultural district should come up to the microphone, state their name and the town in which they reside. There will be no cross-discussion with members of the legislature. This is our opportunity to hear from the public, and legislators will have their opportunity to discuss the applications before voting on them at the meeting of the full legislature meeting immediately following this hearing. If you do have a question, please leave your name and contact information with the clerk, and we will get back to you promptly. Moving on to number 5 is public comment. So if there's anybody that wishing to speak, please come up to the podium and state your name.
I don't know if you can hear me. I can't turn on. Better? Can you hear me? I can't actually hear you, so the sound might not be on. Can you hear me?
Is there, I can hear you, but is there amplification in the mic?
Check 1, 2.
Hello?
No, I know you all want to hear me, don't you?
Try 1 more time.
Hello? Check 1, 2.
There's a little bit.
Huh?
When you got close to the mic, I think we heard you.
I want to get electrocuted. Right. It's
Yeah,
up there, guy.
yeah, stay close to the mic again.
But it's okay. Wow, I thought it really cool. Wow.
You can even take it off.
Take it off? No, no, no. My hands are full. Hello. Before I get started, I just have a small question.
How this works for the legislature,
And that is,
who are your constituents? Question. Who are your constituents?
Putnam County.
the county.
Residents of Putnam County.
Not the people, not the towns. Okay. Anyway, I sent everybody a list and a bunch of documents. Altogether 13 documents. And the document explains up to 12. I hope everybody's had a chance to look at this documentation. And hopefully if you have any questions about this documentation, ask me those questions now, because I'm here. And I don't really want to waste everybody's time going through these 11 items, which quite plainly speak for themselves, both in terms of words and pictorially in the pictures attached. And so, briefly, the first one was an email reminding me that the public were not allowed in any way comment or talk at the hearing of the physical service agreement. So that means I had to come here to give my thoughts and my version of the facts. Document number 2, it's 83 pages, I've just sent you a few of them, but it's done by the Town of Putnam Valley Natural Resources. Very, very good document. It shows that Putnam Valley has 3,956 acres of viable farmland, of which, of course, very few are in the agricultural district, as you know. And the numbers are incredible. When I started this, because it's been 20 years since I first came before this body, I can't remember if any of you were here then, to extol the virtues of having an agricultural district. And it's a give and take thing. You've got to give a little to get a little, and you can't have it all. And that's what this legislature since 2007 has done. They want it all. They wanted to make sure that people who were not liked by the town people who ran the town supervisors, would definitely not get into the agricultural district. It may just be a coincidence, but the last 5 years, every time I've applied, within a few days of my application, the building inspector turns up and gives me a violation. Why? And most of those violations are spurious. Of course, I find them in court. This one currently is costing over $7,000, and it's still in court. It's very minor. It is not on one of these parcels that's before you today. I have never had any violations on 72,150, 113 acres. There's a viable farm there. There's 42 pigs, 350 chickens. I can't remember how many ducks and geese anymore, but there's a lot of them. A lot of eggs, a lot of money's gone into it. $7,500 on a well because they need water. Redoing a pig pen now to bring in another 40 pigs. So it is a real deal. It's been mentioned about business plans and profitability. If you went around the 48 contiguous states and asked every farmer, do you have a business plan? Are you profitable? They laugh at you. Of course they laugh at you. What businesses are profitable? Yes, some are. Some are not. But farms are a difficult and dangerous game. Anyway, I'll move on from that to Natural Resources Inventory. It's a very, very nice document. I hope everyone reads it. ECMS, which the representative here this evening works with the DC, and they found no violations, and never any violations on 7150. and he'll be able to attest to that, and will do so under oath in a court of law if necessary. The letter number 5, document number 5, a letter to you, the legislature. Where's the camera? Hello, just so people know what I look like. The letter makes, it's a very confusing letter. There's actually no proof whatsoever in any of Taylor's statements. None of the other Ag board members I spoke to, which I'm only able to get hold of 2, the others are mysterious, I think. One here, Ginny Nasserino. Anyway, I have not actually spoken to anybody from the Ag Board for more than 12 years, although I was chair of it for 3 years when it started. Very good relationship with everybody. Cornell Cooperative almost never get involved in anything. You pick up the phone and call them about, oh, we're a farm in Putnam Valley. We very much would like you to help us get into the Ag District. That's what you're going to hear. Click. I would contact all the members of the Ag Board. I only managed to find out the names today. I have to foil any more information I was told about who they are, where they are, and how to contact them. I will foil that. Then I will send them all a letter saying, can you help me get into the agricultural district? Quarter of the farm that I am. Spending $100,000 in taxes for nothing. Can't even get a farm stand up. That's part of my profitability problem. They won't let me. So I won't hear from the members of the Ag Board. You know that. You know that. This is getting to be politics. The letter from the town supervisors every year is the same thing. Unsubstantiated, I destroy historic barns. There's never been one in Putnam County, let alone Putnam Valley. Maybe in the 18th century. Back in 2007, the same supervisor, who was a legislator for District Number 2 in those days, sent a letter saying, oh, what a wonderful, wonderful farm I have. How times change, don't they? I had to foil everything, as you know, from the documents. I haven't had any response from any of the foils I've sent. So I have not been able to find out who is on the board or anything else. The decision that we would not be in the Ag District was made, sent to us on June 2nd. That is 13 days before that same decision was sent to the legislature. That's really odd, isn't it? Normally you send it to the legislature and then you send it either at the same time or maybe a few minutes after. But 13 days before, the only person that's involved in this is Laurie Taylor. There is nobody else. And Laurie Taylor has told Amy Say that, oh yes, you must have a business plan. So Amy Say said, oh yes, they must have a business plan. But nowhere is it written they must have a business plan. Nowhere is it written in the law, AML 301, ABC, AA25, none of these is written anywhere that a farm should be profitable. We are actually slightly profitable, but it doesn't say anywhere we should be. Nowhere does it say we should have a business plan. So this is an invention, and I'm sorry you were mistaken about that, but this is my point. If anybody has any questions, I'll be delighted, yay, happy, even to answer them. Because over the last 12, 13 years, nobody's asked me any questions. Why? Any questions, anybody? You want to ask me? Am I telling the truth? Before I hand over to Patrick, town supervisor, Putnam Valley, who's going to say something. And then he's going to get followed by this gentleman. I thank you very much for your time, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairwoman and legislators. The bottom line, forget about business models, forget about all of that. There are outstanding violations since 2007 that have not been corrected. multiple acres of property were dumped upon illegally with toxic substances, and still it has not been cleaned up. The town has been fighting this tooth and nail in every court imaginable. And we've had settlements in 3 separate courts, the most recent being Victor Grossman's court, where he ordered it to be remediated in a certain amount of time. Well, the remediation has not occurred. That is very obvious, and it is state law. If you have violations from the town on the property you wish to become an agricultural district, you cannot become an agricultural district. The town cannot, and we really request that this agricultural district status not be given to an individual who is not a good steward of the land, who has polluted that property to the extent that the DEC itself said it must be remediated. That's really all I've got to say. That's the biggest obstacle for Valley View Farms of getting their agricultural district. Clean up the mess you made. You've had close to 15 years to do so. And we've never got that cooperation. It's been dragged into one court after another to where we're in bankruptcy court now. And once that's settled, then we'll end up back in the court again to enforce the mandate that Victor Grossman put down just a couple of years ago. I thank you for listening. And again, Putnam Valley really hopes that you do not grant this agricultural district. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sorry, I didn't want to say anything. 2 very small points I have to make. Number one, Justice Victor Grossman has not made any order concerning this. The previous judge had. Number 2, as far as bankruptcy goes, I don't know why this word bankruptcy keeps coming like this. Several people who signed the Declaration of Congress, the Declaration of Independence, were bankrupt. Does that mean that paper's no good because they were bankrupt? I don't know. I'm in a reorganization called Chapter 11. It involves millions of dollars that I'm owed and that I owe. Fortunately, I'm owed more than I owe. The only way to clear that up was in a bankruptcy court. It has absolutely nothing to do with farming pigs, ducks, or geese. It's been brought up as a slur, and I want to point that out. But as I said, Justice Victor Grossman's never made an order. If he had, he would produce it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Harry Sutwisher. I work for Valley View Farms. I'm the environmental consultant. I've worked at the DEC for 15 years on several parcels for many clients to remediate properties. I'm working with the DEC to remediate the parcel in question, but that parcel in question isn't currently, they're not currently requesting to be in the agricultural district. It's owned by Mr. Kaspar. It's owned by Valley View Farms, but it's separate from the requests that are being made. In the grand scheme of things, Mr. Kaspar has many acres that are being considered or he's applied for. And on this map here, I don't know if you can see, but all the hashed lines on this map, basically
200 feet to the inch.
yeah. So it's over 400 acres. But the parcel in question, where there are violations, is just this small portion. And there are very small areas in that parcel where there was legal dumping that we are addressing. And I'm in contact with DEC currently to remediate those parcels. Mr. Kaspar is just requesting that these other parcels that he owns be considered for the ag district, so he can, have a viable farm. So I mean, there are very small areas. Generally, about where my finger is, it's smaller than a dime that need to be remediated on this large map. And the fact that that is holding up his entry into the ag district, it seems small, honestly. And yes, he is in bankruptcy. Yes, he's trying to remediate the errors in his ways, and he is. And he's making progress towards that. But the town hasn't even allowed for him to set up a farm stand or sell any of his products on his parcel because he can't get a permit because he has a violation on one parcel. But he has several others that don't. And so the town is saying that there's toxic substances. Now, there are some chemicals that are above the regulatory values, but they're not as bad as the town is claiming to get your attention. So we are addressing them. The DEC is involved. I'm involved directly. If you guys have questions with any of the maps that I've drawn, I'd be more than happy to help. I can address any of your concerns specifically, individually if needed. But our goal here is to get into the ag district, and I'm here to help that. And I think Mr. Caspar would like to go in that way, but the town has other ideas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Very quickly. The fear of the town is that if Mr. Casper is given his agricultural district status, he will continue the dumping, the continued removal of historic stone walls, the continued cutting down of trees without a permitting process. This is his history. It is documented. I sent you all the court orders and everything else in the packet that I gave you prior to the fiscal service meeting. This is not fiction. You know, the representative can say what he wishes. He's on his payroll. I understand. You're going to appease the boss. Bottom line is, if he's given agricultural district, he will continue to face and destroy that property. And that is our concern. It took us years in court to have him stop dumping. Finally, he did, and still has not remediated. That's the issue. He will continue doing what he did. There is no doubt in my mind, claiming I have agricultural privilege, because that's what held us up in court for so long, when he was dumping cement and asphalt and tiles and everything else into this small, over 10 acres of property, closer to 20 if you go beyond where it's perimetered off, because there are spots beyond that 10 acres that we found contamination. So again, we request that it not be granted to Mr. Casper. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have a reply?
Yes.
So I'm a court appointed. I'm not on his payroll directly. The court appointed me to assist Mr. Caspar remediate his property. So to that point, I am effectually trying to remediate his property, and I'm working with them to do that. Now, with respect to the contamination, this work that he speaks of, where there was cutting and there was dumping, that was done over 12 years ago. Mr. Caspar has no interest in going back down that route. I tell you this, he's been through many years of litigation. He doesn't want to return to that status in any way. He wants to start a farm. That's his goal. He has no interest in that. And maybe the town has reservations. I mean, they can have reservations, but he is not interested in that. There's no benefit to him to continue that. So he does still request that he have, entry into this agricultural district, because that would benefit the community, it would benefit the county, it would benefit us all. So if you wouldn't mind, I don't think that the town's concerns are valid in that sense. Yes, he did dump. He's not considering it, and I think he's come a long way since then.
I'm sorry, what was your name
My name is Harry Suttish,
and what firm are you with?
Environmental Consulting and Management Services.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you guys have any other questions, feel free. Thank you.
wishing to speak? Make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Adjourn. I'm sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's premature. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Putnam County Legislature, Tuesday, July 6, 2021. Please stand for the pledge and remain standing for the legislative prayer. I call on Legislator Yonke, please.
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Legislator Sage, please.
Daily, we live side by side, sharing our community. We take each other for granted living our lives, going through our days, seldom thinking of community, seldom stopping to think of the needs of our neighbors, caught up in living and providing for ourselves and family. Community is just there, and we take it for granted until disaster strikes, hardship comes, or weather rages. Then suddenly we desperately need our community. We need it to help us survive, keep hope alive, to live. It's community that provides the essential safety net.
Roll call.
District 1, Legislator Montgomery.
Present.
District 2, Legislator Goulman.
Present.
District 3, Legislator Nasarino. District 5, Legislator Albano.
Present.
District 6, Legislator Yonke.
President.
District 7, Legislator Castellano.
President.
District 8, Legislator Sage.
Present.
District 9, Legislator Sullivan.
Present.
District 3, Chairwoman Agneson.
Present. This evening, we have one proclamation, pre-trial probation parole supervision week. I call on Legislator Castellano to present.
How are you, sir? Good. To see you. We have from probation today our director, Gene Funicelli. So we have the following proclamation in front of us this week. Pretrial probation parole supervision week, July 18th to July 24th. Whereas the community corrections is an essential part of the justice system, whereas community corrections professionals uphold the law and dignity while recognizing the right of the public to be safeguarded from criminal activity, whereas community corrections professionals are responsible for supervision for the adults and juvenile offenders in our community. It certainly has been a very, very difficult year for these essential employees to Putnam County and keeping us safe and keeping these individuals under the proper care that they need. So resolved that the Putnam County Executive and the Putnam County Legislature do hereby proclaim the week of July 18th to July 24th, 2021 as pretrial, probation, parole supervision week, and encourage the Putnam County residents to honor these community corrections officers and professionals and recognize their achievements for what you do for Putnam County. And I know your time of service is coming to an end soon, and we appreciate everything you've done for Putnam County over the last, how many years have you been with us?
33.
We can't thank you enough. We know you've done a tremendous amount of work, and it's my honor to give you this proclamation on behalf of the Putnam County Executive and the Putnam County Legislature. Thank you very much. If you'd like to have a few words.
Just want to say thank you on behalf of the staff and probation department for this proclamation and this recognition. Probation kind of flies under the radar sometimes in the criminal justice system, but it's an important job. It's not an easy job, but what we try to do is change people's behavior. They come to us because they've gotten in some kind of trouble, and short of going to jail, we are able to try and work with them, get them on the right track. And I think we do a pretty good job, and I really appreciate the recognition. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, maybe touch on this quickly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
You can't go away without that.
Poor guy, he's high.
Sorry.
Thank you,
Thank
Gene.
you, Gene.
Moving on to number 4.
I'd like to make a point of order, please, for the record, point of order. For the record, I'd like the chairperson and the county attorney to confirm that the caucus held prior to this meeting, that no county business was conducted or discussed, which would be the subject of open meetings law.
I'm not sure why you question that at every meeting.
I'm
Please, you
making
know-
a point of order. I would like the county attorney and the chairwoman to
The
confirm
chair is
that no...
speaking. I am trying to speak and answer you.
Chair, I think we
Yeah.
should check with the
I would like,
attorney,
yes,
but
I
it's a
would,
point of order.
That's not a point of order. A point of order is to enforce rules. That's an inquiry. That's not on the agenda, and it's not a proper point of order.
Well, the point of order then would be for the record to indicate that you refuse the order of refusal and the point of order. And my question to let me know if you discussed county business prior to the meeting.
as you know, caucus meetings are acceptable and permissible by law, right? They are the regular and accepted practice of the New York State Legislature.
Were you conducting county
I don't know why,
business
I
in
don't
your
know why you're always
caucus?
questioning.
Were you-
Caucuses are confidential. If you want to discuss it
Why
further,
can't
the
you
proper
answer whether or not you
venue,
were
bring it to the Rules
discussing
Committee.
county business?
It's out of
No.
order.
There are no business is discussed in any caucus in New York State either.
Can you
Okay?
confirm that on the record? Can you state on the record, no
I'm
county
saying
business
that
was
is how we
discussed?
conduct our business. We do not,
And I'd like to question my point of order. I believe it is a point of order, so we'll have to figure that out as well.
as you know, caucuses are confidential.
County
You bring
business
this
is
up.
not confidential, especially when 8 legislators are
But you bring this
discussing
up as a
it.
question at every meeting. I just said, maybe the proper venue, we just bring it to the rules and we can
I
discuss it
think,
there.
I think I've discussed this at rules and actually sent a memo to the chairperson.
There's nothing to discuss.
It's simple, we comply with the law.
It's
Right.
permissible, a good policy, and no business is conducted, so.
We comply with the law.
So you're confirming on the record, no county business was discussed during your meeting?
Okay, we're going to move on now to, where are we? Okay, approval of minutes, number 4. Regular meeting, June 1st, 2021, and Budget and Finance meeting, June 1st, 2021. Moving on to number 5 is correspondence from the county auditor. There was no activity during this reporting period. Number 6 is pre-filed resolutions, the Budget and Finance Committee, which is all legislators. Which is 6A. The Budget and Finance Committee has reviewed and recommended the adoption of the attached decentralized budget review process for implementation in 2021 of the adoption of the 2022 budget. Therefore, be it resolved that the Putnam County Legislature hereby adopts the attached budget review process. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Goulden.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Ananisia.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Moving on to pre-filed resolutions and personnel. I call on Chairman Yonke from the Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Chairwoman Ananisia. On behalf of myself, legislators Nasarino and Sullivan, I'd like to move forward with item 6B, which is the approval of a budgetary transfer for the purchasing and highway facilities, reorganization and reclassification. This is moving money around with no fiscal impact.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Goldman.
Yes.
Legislator Yonke.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Andezio.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 6C is the approval of a standard workday and reporting resolution. This is a requirement of the county to file standard workdays for elected and appointed employees based on time and attendance records. It's maintained and submitted by these officials to the clerk of the legislature.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Goldman.
Yes.
Legislator Yonke.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Andezio.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I call on Legislator Sage, who will be filling in for Legislator Nasarino's absence this evening for the Protective Services Committee.
Thank you. On behalf of Chairwoman Nasarino, Legislator Sullivan, and myself, I'd like to bring forward the following for approval. Item number 6D, approval for budgetary amendment 21A050 for the Sheriff's Department 2019 Protective K-9 Team Grant. This is a grant in the amount of $20,000 that will be used to replace an existing bomb detecting K-9, as well as help fulfill overtime and equipment for K-9.
Any discussion? Zero fiscal.
Zero. It's a grant.
Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Goldman.
Yes.
Legislator Yonke.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Andezio.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6E, approval for a resolution to support for the supporting accurate views of Emergency Services Act of 2021, the 911 Saves Act, the U.S. House of Representatives Bill 2351. This is the federal government's standard classification system, sorts workers into occupational categories for statistical purposes and according to the nature of the work performed, in some cases on the skills, education, or training needed to perform. America's 911 telecommunicators are currently incorrectly categorized in the SOCs as an office and administrative support occupation, a category which includes secretaries, office clerks, and taxi cab dispatchers. The members of the Putnam County Legislature will advocate an accurate statistical classification of 911 professionals to support critical research into the nature of 911 impacts, 911 jobs, which suffer substantially from those encountered on safety, office, and administration applications. And I apologize, I failed to make a motion to substitute the resolution with a revised resolution that adds the wording that copies the bill's sponsors. I'd like to make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Madam Chairwoman, you have to call for a second and then a vote on the motion to
Okay, I seconded it.
substitute.
I seconded it, so we're calling the substitution.
Now we vote on the substitution.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So now I'll bring forward the approval to support the revised resolution that includes the resolution be sent to the United States Representatives John Patrick Maloney, U.S. Senator Charles Schumer, the United States Senator Christopher Gillibrand, as well as the bill sponsors. Thank you.
Any discussion?
I'd like to make a comment, please, in case the public's wondering. This was introduced by me to the committee, and I'm happy to see that it's moving forward. Our dispatchers should be classified as first responders. It's long overdue, and I hope to see this pass on the state level as well as on the federal level.
Thank you. Anyone else? Discussion? Roll call vote.
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Bowman.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Edmonds.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6F. I would like to make a motion on this one as well to substitute a resolution to state that the resolution will be sent to the bill sponsors as well.
Second.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. This particular item is approval to support the New York State legislation designating certain emergencies and public safety dispatchers and operators as first responders.
Any discussion? I'm proud to support this bill. The first responders are the first contact of the emergency response chain, providing direction and instruction for all emergency calls, and they should never be taken for granted. Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Bowman.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Edmonds.
Yes.
Motion carried.
I call on Chairman Sullivan for Rules, Enactments, Intergovernmental Relations Committee.
Thank you, Chairwoman Adenizio. On behalf of myself, Legislators Albano and Castellano, I'd like to move forward with item 6G, which is the approval for the litigation settlement in the case of Roberts versus County of Putnam.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Bowman.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Edmonds.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Next is item 6H, which is the approval for the local law adopting a pilot youth deer hunting program.
Any discussion?
Yes, as I mentioned at the committee meeting, I've had a number of my constituents asking that this be approved, and I support this wholeheartedly.
Anyone else?
I also have heard from several constituents who are in favor of this. I come from a family of hunters. I grew up hunting in a hunting household, and much of what I grew up on, we grew in our garden or harvesting by hunting or fishing. Hunters are conservationists, and they are responsible for paying excise taxes on flood habitat restoration, land conservation. They advocate for open space that provide critical habitat and recreational opportunities that are used by everyone. Hunters provide other benefits like managing wildlife populations throughout the United States. During COVID, many retreated to the outdoors, and the state saw a surge in the issuance of hunting licenses. This brought people outdoors to mitigate meat shortages in the supply chain during COVID. The time-honored tradition needs to be handed down to our children. In New York, we are the only state that does not allow 12 and 13-year-olds to hunt big game with a firearm. 12 and 13-year-olds are currently able to hunt big game with a bow and are able to hunt small game with a rifle, but not big game with a rifle. By opting in 12 and 13-year-olds to hunt with a supervised adult, usually a parent, passing down the love of the outdoors, These youths are learning about respect for firearms, learning important gun safety, and full support of this.
Anyone else?
Just like to, a little bit what,
Yes,
excuse me.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes. Just what's included in our package, and it's important, I think, to mention that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service study says that the community spends approximately $5 billion per year in the state of New York in pursuit of sporting activities, and sporting activities are responsible for the support of approximately 56,000 jobs across New York State. So I think anything that has such a strong economic impact on our economy is important, as well as allowing youth to have other activities to be involved with, and I am in full support of this local law.
Thank you. I have also heard from many of my constituents. They contacted me in favor of this. This is a pilot program brought forth by New York State Environmental Conservation Law, and it will extend through 2023. And just so everyone's aware that every junior hunter must complete a course in hunter education and must obtain a hunting license. Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Goldman.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 6I is the approval for the local law to amend section 2.04 of the Putnam County Charter entitled Powers and Duties.
Any discussion?
Yes, I have a comment.
Yes.
So, I made some comments at the committee meeting, and again, first I'd like to move to table this because I don't believe the process of the review commission did its due diligence in collaborating with the residents of Putnam County, the elected officials of Putnam County, and county government. So first I'll make a motion and then I have a comment. Can you call for a second?
Do we have a second? Seeing there's no second.
Okay, so the county charter is the constitutional framework for county government. The county charter should provide for a government that is efficient, effective, accountable, environmentally and fiscally responsible, and most of all, inclusive and open. It should be reflective of the democratic system we are here to uphold and defend. It should be representative of different geographic areas and demographic diversity of the county. The Putnam County Charter Commission, this review process, and these revisions are none of these things. The commission to review our county government, like any body charged with a representative government system, should be made up of bipartisan representation. This should have been a collaborative effort made up of members from local government and the public of every party. Instead, this commission is exclusive to county government and one party. That's dangerous governing. There's no evidence that this committee did their due diligence. I have requested a schedule of meeting times when this commission was to meet and meeting minutes, and I have not seen those prior to these local laws being introduced. And that's a big deal. Also, our county DA and our sheriff had comments regarding these very changes and the county charter. They did request their comments to be read into the record, and they were not. The DA did request his comments be read into the record during the committee meeting, and those comments were not read into the record, and I don't see the comments from the sheriff included for the public to view. So I will read the DA's comments regarding these charter changes into the record. I see that, good afternoon, Legislator Sullivan. I see that Thursday's legislative agenda has the attached charter sections up for discussion. I briefly spoke with Rob Fiorillo about subsections T and U. I'm sending you these comments so that in the event this is brought up in discussion, you can make them part of the record. The two subsections read as follows. 2.04, powers and duties. The county legislature shall have, but not by limitation, the following powers and duties. T, to require the production or inspection of documents, records, bonds, papers, and other information kept, held, maintained, or in possession of any officers or employee paid from the county funds as deemed necessary. U, to establish, review, and approve policies to be followed by all officers and employees paid from county funds. These are the DA's comments. I assume that these sections refer to the usual and appropriate duties and responsibilities of the legislature. Some have expressed concern to me that subsection T would give the legislature the power to obtain records from my office or the Putnam County Sheriff's Office regarding ongoing investigations and active case files. Obviously, this would be in contradiction to state law regarding the duties and responsibilities of my office, which are completely independent from the legislature. As for establishing policies to be followed by all officers and employees paid by county funds, again, I assume this refers to the usual and appropriate duties and responsibilities of the legislature. For example, purchasing and expenditure policies and rules, union issues and resolutions, holidays, vacations, sick leave, etc. Clearly, the legislature would not have the authority to establish law enforcement protocols for my office regarding ethical guidelines and responsibilities, investigative protocols, assignments of staff, continuing legal education responsibilities, and other areas which are the sole province of the district attorney. I bring this to your attention only because the language of the proposal is vague. It's vague enough or all-encompassing enough to be read to mean that the legislature could now be involved in numerous activities that are independent responsibility of the district attorney. Very truly yours, Robert Kennedy. The sheriff also had some comments about the proposed amendment and was not able to have them read into the record. As the Board of Legislature knows, the Putnam County Charter requires the county legislature to adopt a charter revision commission every 10 years to review the charter and make recommendations for revisions. On December 1st, 2020, the county legislature established such a commission to make recommendations to it, as the commission has no authority and in of itself to enact or amend the charter. Thereafter, on June 16, 2021, the Rules, Enactments, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee briefly discussed and quickly adopted a resolution to amend the Putnam County Charter and to present the proposed amendments for immediate consideration by the full county board on July 6th. Notably, the proposed amendments broadly authorize legislative action without any specific limitation, thereby creating a power that could unlawfully encroach upon the independent powers and duties of other Putnam County elected officials, including my own elected office as sheriff. As currently drafted, I respectfully submit that the proposed amendments cannot be adopted into law. As the chief law enforcement officer for the county, the sheriff is entrusted by the New York State Constitution and statutes to perform and oversee numerous matters, such as the county's correctional facilities, operations, prisoners transport, 911 emergency response, county patrols, and security details. The sheriff is an officer of the court and a conservator of the peace within the county. The sheriff has the power to hire and fire individuals to assist him in performing these critically and highly sensitive responsibilities, and has established the law enforcement protocols and policies necessary for their implementations. Such duties illustrate the significant and necessary control over the employee's non-economic terms and conditions of employment and render the sheriff, along with the county, a joint employer. In light of the aforementioned, I am required to protect the integrity of the sheriff's office and its operations that have been entrusted to me and challenge the legality of the legislative proposal that is currently in review. Specifically, again here, The powers and duties. The county legislature shall have, but not limitation, but the following powers and duties. We read them previously. So subdivision T appears to mandate the full disclosure of all documents to the county legislature. While I acknowledge that the legislature has some investigative powers, such investigative powers cannot interfere with my statutory responsibilities. My duties as sheriff are deeply rooted in the public safety, resource protection, and emergency services, which are especially critical to ongoing investigations, active cases, and litigation. Indeed, during the aforementioned June 16th Rules Committee meeting, concerns regarding the vague language and overreaching authority of the proposed amendments were raised by the Putnam County District Attorney, another elected official with similar constitutional and statutory responsibilities over public safety. Those concerns were not fully vetted by the Rules Committee, but summarily discussed, dismissed after Legislative Council acknowledged that such limitations exist, but claimed that such limitations are implicit. Implicit by definition means not plainly expressed. Here lies the crux of the problem and the potential for its abuse. With respect to statutory construction and subsequent interpretation, the plain language of the statute and the need for accuracy are paramount. The statement by Legislative Council confirms that the power authorized by the proposed amendments is limited and admits that such limitation is not plainly expressed therein. Consequently, a change in the proposal to expressly address these limitations is a reasonable request that must be taken before its final adoption. Similarly, subdivision U appears to authorize the county legislature to establish, review, approve policies without limitation. Like the district attorney, I recognize that the county legislature has certain policy-making authority, such as, for example, policies relating to sexual harassment, equal opportunity, county property, and equipment. However, the county legislature cannot usurp my legal authority and administration over my law enforcement personnel, policies, and protocols. Moreover, the public disclosure of sensitive law information procedures and protocols can unnecessarily endanger the lives of the officers and the welfare of the general public whom they are trying to protect. Consequently, this proposed amendment, U, like T, must be amended to expressly address such limitations before its final adoption. These proposals were recommended in the midst of coronavirus pandemic and at the time when in-person access to county legislative procedures was closed and virtual access meetings limited to those individuals who are fortunate enough to have a computer and savvy enough to participate virtually. As the county legislature intends to open its doors again to the general public for the first time in 2021 on July 6th, public input should be welcomed to further vet the need for these proposed changes to the Putnam County Charter. As you know, it is extremely important that public hearings are properly noticed to encourage public comment. Public input is an integral part of the legislative process, especially where, as here, the legislation involves a charter amendment and an inherent grant of power. Finally, I suspect the motivation behind these proposed amendments is not based upon necessity. One commentary made during the Rules Committee was that the proposal was for clarification to obtain information requested, as there has been problems getting information. In the area of public safety, emergency services, and litigation, and the disclosure of confidential information, the Sheriff's Office has to maintain a delicate balance between the protection of society at large with the privacy of individuals and their families. Maintaining this delicate balance is admittedly quite difficult at times, especially when circumstances are tragic. Nevertheless, it is my obligation as sheriff to ensure this delicate balance is maintained to the best of my ability. So while it is my intention to always cooperate with legislative requests for information in a timely manner, I intend to do so in accordance with the law and in a manner that will not prematurely disclose information that may have a detrimental effect to the well-being of residents of Putnam County and its public servants. Those are read into the record by the DA and by the sheriff, and my comment is case in point. As we saw on a March 2021 agenda. The name disclosed of the deceased and the cause of death. There was no reason for that item to be on the agenda. It traumatized the family. I don't understand why it appeared on an agenda other than for political reasons to get information out of the sheriff. There was no legislative involvement in that.
Legislator O'Connor.
Okay, the key is in accordance with the law. In my 10 years, I haven't seen any abuse of power by the legislature. The key is full disclosure where appropriate. Obviously, we're going to comply with state law, and we probably agree with some of the statements the sheriff said to the DA. The DA states it clearly. We're going to comply with whatever the law says. But I have seen in my 10 years times when we've asked for information that was pertinent for us to make a decision, and we have not gotten it. So I think this clearly states that we are entitled to certain information so that we can make logical decisions. And that's what our intention is. As far as the charter, a change can be made anytime. Any legislator can propose a change. So that's open for eternity to make changes and improvements. And I haven't seen any other recommendations come in by legislators, so I don't see that there's any real concern for that right now. Thank you.
Legislator Young.
Thank you. I've reviewed both the DA's letter and the sheriff's lengthy letter. It seems that the sheriff understands that there are limitations to what we have access to, and those limitations are set by state statute. We're not going to get any more information than we can already legally get. We'll not be granted access to anything that's confidential. I don't know why there's so much concern. I think this just clarifies what we're entitled to. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to address,
Legislator Sullivan.
thank you, Chairwoman Adenizio. I'd like to address a few things that Legislator Montgomery has mentioned because, you know, I guess it's not unusual for her to kind of mislead and try and confuse people related to the geographic makeup of the Charter Commission. There are people on the Charter Commission that live in all sections of the county. As far as political party goes, we sent letters out to all town supervisors, Republicans, Democrats, and any other party that they may be, asking them for comments and questions, suggestions to the charter, if they'd like to make any comments. So to say it was only one party or another party is completely not true. And lastly, we did, I believe, send a memo this week to all of the legislature, letting them know when our next meeting is, which is July 8th at 10 a.m. And we've sent that out, so Legislator Montgomery said that we have not notified them of our meetings. In fact, we have, and that memo has gone out a couple of days ago. But I would like to read our response to the sheriff's. I'm sorry for the, but we have to, if Legislator Montgomery is going to read things into the record, it's important that we are able to read the response to the sheriff into the record. And so I'll begin that response now. Sheriff Langley's comments on the proposed charter amendments show that he does not understand how the Putnam County Charter works, how laws are drafted, or what his duties and obligations are when it comes to functioning within the structure of Putnam County government. There is nothing in the proposed amendments to the charter that will allow any branch of Putnam County government, including the legislature, to interfere with the constitutional and law enforcement duties of the sheriff, or with his ability to run the sheriff's office. In suggesting otherwise, the sheriff is just playing politics in an election year and playing on the public's fears that their safety will be compromised, and as he so often does. The sheriff does not like that one of the proposed charter amendments, subdivision T, reinforces the legislature's existing right under the county and state law to obtain information from the sheriff that he is obligated to provide to the legislature, but which the sheriff frequently withholds from the legislature under the false pretense of exceptions and exemptions that do not exist and do not apply. Time and time again, this sheriff has withheld from the legislature and from other county agencies access to records and information that are the property of Putnam County, not the sheriff's personal property, and which are necessary for the legislature to do its job for the people of Putnam County. When he is called upon to explain the legal basis for denying our access to county records, the sheriff can't do it. He can only offer vague, unpersuasive, and legally invalid buzzwords like sensitive information, protecting the integrity of operations, and ongoing investigations. This legislature will not allow this sheriff to operate like the secret police, and we will persist in our efforts to obtain from him the information to which we are entitled for the benefit of the citizens and the taxpayers of Putnam County. The public has demanded transparency in policing, and this sheriff repeatedly fails to be transparent when it most matters. This sheriff also does not like that another proposed charter amendment, subdivision U, reinforces the legislature's role as the policy-making branch of government. He ignores that the charter already empowers the legislature to determine policy for the county. The current charter states, the legislative, appropriating, and policy-determining powers of Putnam County shall be vested in an elected body which shall be known as the county legislature. When the sheriff complains that the proposed amendments are broad, he shows he does not understand the charter's purpose or how it works. The charter is like the U.S. Constitution in that it is a framework that broadly establishes the powers, duties, and obligations of various parts of government. The very first sentence of the charter states, "This charter and all amendments thereto shall constitute the form of government for the county of Putnam." In establishing the form of our county government, the charter is supposed to be broad. By contrast, it is the laws that make up our county code that are supposed to be narrowly tailored. Legislative resolutions and local laws use the powers established in the charter and apply them to specific situations. Those local laws can be challenged in court if they are thought to overreach, conflict with state or federal law, or conflict with the state or U.S. constitutions. This sheriff's argument that the proposed charter amendments are improper because they do not contain any specific limitation and have instead implicit limitations is simply wrong and shows that our current sheriff misunderstands how the charter works and misunderstands how the drafting interpretation of law works. This is a shocking display of ignorance coming from the sheriff. This sheriff's argument, and that is all it is, an argument, is contradicted by the charter itself. Had he cared enough to actually read the charter, this sheriff would have noticed that the charter's inherent structure is to grant specific powers, together with all rights, privileges, functions, and powers necessarily implied or incidental thereto. Section 103 of the Charter. The necessarily implied powers and duties to enforce the Charter provisions aren't spelled out in the Charter, just as the implied limitation on those powers are not spelled out in the charter. They do not need to be. It would be ridiculous to require, as this sheriff suggests, that the charter explicitly state every limitation on a grant of power. This is not how a charter is written, and is not how a charter provisions are applied. A provision in the county charter has to be read in context with the entire charter, with state and federal law, and with state and federal constitutions. We can see how silly the sheriff's complaints are by looking at how they would apply to another power of the legislature in the charter that is broadly worded. Under section 2.04B, the legislature has the power to make appropriations, levy taxes, incur indebtedness, and adopt the county budget. The legislature's power to levy taxes is not described there in any detail, nor does it have any specific limitations, which this sheriff says must be in the charter for a provision to be enforceable. But in reality, the legislature's power to levy taxes in the charter come from numerous implicit limitations. The legislature can't levy a tax that's prohibited by state or federal law or by the Constitution, such as a poll tax. The charter is not vague and unenforceable because it does not say that the legislature has the power to levy taxes except poll taxes, or because it does not include other exceptions or limitations on tax power. Nobody could rationally argue that the legislature's power to levy taxes is invalid because the charter does not contain explicit limitations on that power. Everybody understands and accepts that there are implicit limitations on the broad grant of power in the charter. This is a simple example of why this sheriff is just wrong when he says that the charter cannot delegate a power to the legislature unless every possible application and limitation of that power is spelled out. That's not what the charter is for or how it works. He should know better. Finally, this sheriff also misunderstands the process to amend the charter. We are voting on July 6th today on a proposed local law to amend the charter. If the legislature passes this local law, there will be a public hearing on it before the county executive can sign it into law. So this sheriff is once again wrong when he claims that the legislature and the public do not have sufficient opportunity to review and comment on the proposal before the charter is amended. Given that Sheriff Langley is so fundamentally wrong in every argument and comment he has made on these proposals, I urge my colleagues to reject them and support the amendments, and I will be voting in favor of them. Thank you.
I would like to address Legislator Sullivan's comments toward me.
I would like to see if anyone else has any comments. Legislator Sage.
I just have a couple things. DA Tandy stated that usual and appropriate inspection of documents, and that's exactly what it is, usual and appropriate. There's no conflict with state laws in the state of New York. State laws prevail. This applies to matters before the legislature. I'd also like to point out that going through the police panel review process, there's been time and time again talking about transparency and law enforcement. For example, in the news these days, you hear many times about an incident happening, and immediately they say this particular law enforcement officer is remanded to desk duty with pay until further investigation. We don't have any access to any of that information here in Putnam County. If an incident happens in the sheriff's department, we're not able to access that information, even if we ask. It's not provided. So I think it just plays into transparency in law enforcement. We represent the people of Putnam County, and we want to make sure that people of Putnam County understand what's going on. As Legislator Sullivan pointed out, there is no department that's an island upon itself. As representatives of our specific districts, we have the obligation to look out for the taxpayer and the citizens of Putnam County. So because of that, I will be voting in favor of this resolution.
Anyone else?
I'd like to respond to Legislator Sullivan's comments.
You can respond. We're not going to have any back and forth again, right? So, you can respond.
I'm asking to respond.
Yes.
I don't think I was.
I'm recognizing you to respond.
Okay, well, that was a bad preface. All of those points that you made, Legislator Sullivan, are great and would have been wonderfully discussed in a commission meeting. So can you tell me when the commission meetings were where you presented these 3 local laws and the minutes from those meetings as I've asked? Because those back and forth with the sheriff and the DA would have been great information to have in a commission meeting. And like the police policy review panel, it was transparent. And as we move ahead and establish the laws of the county, I would think we would want to make it as transparent as possible and include bipartisan participants and include members of the community. One letter out to municipalities does not serve for the change in the charter, asking them what they think if they have any changes they'd like to make, including your community in the changes, possibly calling for meetings with your department heads and asking them and current employees and elected officials and former employees, asking them what worked for them possibly, what didn't work for them, and how can we make these charter review meetings go smoothly and make some actual changes. So when were the meetings? First of all, that include these three local laws. And also, when we talk about usual and appropriate, as Legislator Sage indicated, was it usual and appropriate, and what was the purpose of publishing the name and the case and the cause of death of one of my constituents, asking for documents surrounding his arrest when there wasn't even an indictment and the investigation wasn't even complete? Can you answer that? So here we are with this legislation that would cause this.
You know, we're going to
sensitive information.
Because this is, you know, we want to get into this, not here. You want to have a committee meeting, we could gladly talk, but you're again bringing up so many untruths and misrepresentations. They don't even
It's
warrant
not
a
untrue that you
response.
don't have minutes or a schedule of when
We
these
do have.
meetings were discussed. When were they discussed?
Yes,
If I could just
Legislator
add to
O'Donnell.
this, yeah, I'm a little confused. If this was all brought forward, and we had a rules committee meeting to discuss this in depth, there were no issues. No one had more things to bring up. No one had anything else. We've gotten letters. We didn't have everybody at the meeting. That is the time to discuss these things. If people had other things or wanted to introduce something else or disagreed, that's the time to do it. This is what's before us now. If we agree with it, we'll move it. If somebody has another suggestion, bring it forward. We can always change it again. It's not written in stone. We're overcomplicating something that's relatively simple.
Again, I moved to table it. We did not include the public in any of these local law reviews. There's not a bipartisan commission made up. It includes one party and nothing but county elected officials and employees.
Yeah, I call the question. Make a motion to call the question.
Make a motion to call the question.
Second.
Second. Roll call vote.
Legislator O'Donnell.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Golden.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
No.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Edmondson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Madam Chairwoman, that was the vote
Yes.
on calling the question.
Now,
We're
now
required
we're going to,
have a
yes.
meeting vote on the
To the
pending
vote, yes.
motion.
Legislator O'Donnell.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Golden.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
No.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Edmondson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Chairwoman Anizio. Next will be item 6J, which is the approval for the local law to amend Section 2.08 of the Putnam County Charter entitled Confirmation of Appointments.
Any discussion?
This is Legislator Montgomery
Yes.
again, not based on not the content of this local law, but the process and the fact that no interviews were made, no commission meeting minutes are provided, no schedule of when the meetings occurred are provided, no clear interviews with employees, a clear picture on how these issues contributed to administrative or legislative problems. We could produce a great document if we had all that, and we don't. So I'll be voting no based on that.
Anyone else? Legislator Sage.
The change in this particular section of the charter simply adds submitted to the county legislature. Those are the 4 words, 5 words. Confirmation of appointments, adding submitted to the county legislature. These are just the confirmation appointments that are submitted to the county legislature. I'll be voting for that.
Thank you for clarification on that.
I have a comment, just so everybody
Yes.
understands what Legislator Sage said and what Legislator Montgomery is trying to make you think. The only change on this section of the charter that we are talking about is adding the words submitted to the county legislature. That's it. That's all we're changing right now. Sounded like a lot more was being done than just that, didn't it? So I wanted to make
Legislator Montgomery,
clear-
I'd like to
Excuse me,
respond.
I have to.
Let him finish.
I'm not done yet. And so you heard a whole big speech about not letting people in and not being diverse and all these other misconceptions about what we're doing when we're reviewing the charter. We're reviewing the charter with the commission with input from department heads, town supervisors, and anybody else that would like to present input. And we're trying to make the document a much better document, much easier to understand, with less gray areas in it, so that when something comes up, it's much more clearer and helpful to the legislature in making decisions. That's all we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to
This
call the
Legislator
question.
Montgomery, I believe I would
No,
have an
excuse
opportunity
me,
to
I'm not done.
respond.
I'll make
Second.
second.
Go to the next one.
Roll call vote.
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Wolf.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
No.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Edwards.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Roll call vote.
On the resolution.
Resolution.
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Wolf.
Yes.
Legislator Young.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
No.
Legislator Nasarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Edwards.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 6K is also approval for a local law to amend section 2.09 of the Putnam County Charter entitled Audits. And I'd like to highlight on this change so everybody understands what we're changing. We took out a sentence that read, where appropriate, a single audit or audits may be commissioned by the legislature as required by law. What we did add is the word such instead of the, and then we added a sentence at the end. Additional audits may be commissioned by the Putnam County Legislature at any time. So that's the change we made to the charter. That's all we're talking about here. Again, just to make it clearer for everybody to understand. You know, the charter is only reviewed once every 10 years, and language and terms change over time. And so we made some minor changes to the charter just to make it clearer and easier for people to understand and the legislator to make decisions. Thank you.
I just want to say the review process includes line-by-line overview. We have been fixing commas and periods. So this evening, we're talking about T, subdivision T and U. It's not a new, it's nothing new. And I think some people might think that we have added something, but they're very small revisions. And really, and as Legislator Yonke pointed out also, the proposed amendments will not allow any interference with the constitutional duties of law enforcement, going back to subdivision T, only reinforcing the legislators' existing right to obtain information, which has, by the way, always existed under state law. So nothing's really different. We're not adding.
I move to table it.
A second? Table. Second. Roll call vote? No.
So on the resolution, Legislator Albano,
Yes.
Legislator Castellano,
Yes.
Legislator Goldman,
Yes.
Legislator Yonke,
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery,
No.
Legislator Nasrino, Legislator Sage,
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan,
Yes.
Chairwoman Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
I call in Chairwoman Sage, the Health, Social, Educational, and Environmental Committee.
Thank you. I would like to, on behalf of legislators Adonisio and Nasarino, bring forward the following 6L for approval, budgetary amendment 21A051 from the Office of Senior Resources, outside donations for furniture. The Office of Senior Resources has received a donation from the Friends of Senior Citizens of Putnam County in the amount of $793.90 to purchase outdoor benches for the Putnam Valley Friendship Center. Zero fiscal impact in 2021 and 2022. Put that forward for approval, please.
Any discussion?
Legislator Goldman, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to thank the Friends of the Senior Citizens of Putnam County for this donation. Putnam Valley Senior Center does need these types of furniture, and I'm glad that the donation came to them, so thank you very much.
Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano,
Yes.
Legislator Castellano,
Yes.
Legislator Goldman,
Yes.
Legislator Yonke,
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery,
Yes.
Legislator Nasrino, Legislator Sage,
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan,
Yes.
Chairwoman Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I call in Chairman Albano for the Physical Services.
Thank you, Chairwoman Abizio. On behalf of legislators Castellano, Goodman, and myself, I'd like to move 6N, approval of budgetary amendment 21A055, Highways and Facilities 2001 CHIPS funding. That stands for, basically highway improvement projects, and this is in the amount of $623,808. It's Consolidated Local Street and Highway Improvement Program, is what CHIP stands for. This is extra money that will come in.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano,
Yes.
Legislator Castellano,
Yes.
Legislator Goldman,
Yes.
Legislator Yonke,
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery,
Yes.
Legislator Nasrino, Legislator Sage,
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan,
Yes.
Chairwoman Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. 6N is approval of budgetary transfer 21T119. Financial railroad station maintenance for the MTA. We pay a little over $1 million for maintenance of the MTA stations in our county. And at this point, they've realized that we're slightly short of what the anticipated expenses were. So at this time, we're moving $16,151 to cover that shortage.
Any discussion? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano,
Yes.
Legislator Castellano,
Yes.
Legislator Goldman,
Yes.
Legislator Yonke,
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery,
Yes.
Legislator Nasrino, Legislator Sage,
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan,
Yes.
Chairwoman Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
6O, that's move 6O, possible approval or inclusion of parcels in Putnam County Agricultural District. Whereas the Physical Services Committee of Putnam Legislature reviewed and has approved the recommendations made by the Putnam County Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board. Resolved that Putnam County Legislature accepts and adopts the findings provided by the Putnam County Agricultural and Farmland Protection Board. and be it further resolved, the Putnam County Legislature hereby declines to include any of the 4 parcels requested for inclusion into the Putnam County Agricultural District.
Any discussion?
So a yes vote would be we're accepting the recommendation of the board.
Yes.
Yes. Any discussion? Roll call. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to just reiterate the guidelines for review of local laws that define farm operations, farm agriculture, farmland, or any similar term. This is from the Ag Board of State of New York. Pursuant to Article 25AA, the term for farm operation is used to identify and define commercial enterprises through the use of land, buildings, equipment, and practices to carry out an agricultural enterprise. So what we're talking about here in all of these instances is an actual business with a business plan that generates revenue, not just specifically that it's a nice place to put a farm, or it has good land, or it has trees. It has to have a business plan, and that is according to the state of New York ag law. So I am in favor of what our ag board has put forward this evening, and we voted in accordance with their recommendations.
Anyone else? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Goldman.
Yes.
Legislator Yonke.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nazarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Anasio.
Yes.
Motion carries.
6P is approval of a 2021 consolidated funding application, known as CFA, for grant funding for the projects aimed at increasing local economy development and encouraging growth in Putnam County. Whereas the Putnam County Executive and Putnam County Legislature agreed that the county should submit the 2021 CFA competitive funding applications. The connections with its projects, as more specifically in connection with water quality improvements, environmental protection, historic properties, and that would be in the best interest of the taxpayers of Putnam County. Fortunately, we have some shovel-ready projects that could fit into this criteria, and so it makes a lot of sense for us to apply and see how it pans out.
Any discussion?
Good question. When
Yes.
will we know exactly what grants we're submitting when they're due at the end of the month?
At our physical services meeting, we had outlined 3 possible, if you look at the minutes from the meeting, there were 3 possible areas that we're applying for.
Did we have a copy of the grants and know what exactly we're applying for? Is it just possible, or?
That information was at physical, we
Okay.
can get it to you.
Thank you. I'll look it up.
Anyone else? Roll call vote?
Legislator Albano.
Yes.
Legislator Castellano.
Yes.
Legislator Goldman.
Yes.
Legislator Yonke.
Yes.
Legislator Montgomery.
Yes.
Legislator Nazarino. Legislator Sage.
Yes.
Legislator Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairwoman Anasio.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving on to number 7 is other business. Seeing there's no other business, move on to recognition of public on agenda items. If any member of the public wishes to speak on any agenda item this evening, please come up to the podium and state your name.
Just had a question on item 6H, the local law adopting the plan of use. This has come up before, it comes up actually in many states. Where do you suppose this hunting is going to take place? Because it needs some space for using guns, and bows and arrows and stuff like that. It needs space to use like 2,000 or 3,000 feet safe in the public. So what lands in Putnam County has your mind where this pilot program is going to take place?
Well, I would imagine anywhere that in New York State that, not anywhere that allows hunting. There are specific areas in Putnam County that you allow.
You have no idea.
No, we do have to, by law, you have to do designated areas that are only for hunting.
You
can't just-
should know for various reasons, one would say the other, so that these kids, so certainly it's a great idea. I've done this since I was 9. I was actually in my ordnance in the Navy. I know a little bit about guns. I'll move on to 6J. This has also come up in the past. 15 years ago, in fact, I, my chagrin, made some comments to the legislator and to the state, and was actually backed by Commissioner another commissioner, and another one, regarding the confirmation of appointments. Specifically, I picked on the areas where the legislature has appointed people who shouldn't be on the board. But that's not a problem. I don't have a problem. That happens all. But they weren't appointed the people who should be on a lot of these boards. Soil and water conservation. Easy example. Has to have 2 farmers on it, doesn't. The makeup of the country agricultural farming has been very, very strange since I left. In fact, the chair went to prison for 10 years, the one who replaced me. So, yes, it's become very political, and as I say to my chagrin, within a year, 2007, this legislative body passed a resolution which basically put me out of business, and a few other farmers who have been using it to sort of damage over the heads of people, which is, if you have a violation on the body, you are a bad person, you cannot become a member of the district. So item 6J is very much worth a close look, because you're appointing people who shouldn't be on these boards, and you're not appointing people who should be. This has been going on now. It's close on 17 or 18 years. It started rearing its head, but it's been very strong in the last 15 years. The rule of the board body, legislative body, should take notice of this, because you can have clubs within a club. You already got clubs within a club. You know that. I know that. The public, all small members of the public, we know that. Taxpayers know that. Some of them, but they're going to know more. And I think that certainly your freedom goes deserve Article 78, and I think the members of the public should look very closely at what this body does, how it's itself, follows itself, maybe one exception. And you have to listen to the people. People, the people here forever. What's impact? They're here forever. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Good to see most of you. So I came tonight.
Can you state your name?
Scott Ring.
Thank you.
From Hopac. And so I came to talk about the commission. 10 years ago, there was a charter commission made up of individuals, not just within county government. I do think it's important. It is this legislative body that votes on it. So it's crucial that you have outside contributors. Just to sidestep on 6C, the standard workday reporting resolution. This may be an oversight or my misunderstanding of it. I don't see Legislator Nasserino's information on here.
I think is that because she's in a different tier? Because I haven't read that.
Oh, maybe she
may not have reported.
No, she's retired.
Okay, yeah, so I just oversight.
Yeah,
So on the commission, it was interesting, Legislator Sullivan, through all that condescension, you're very condescending, I'm sure you know that. Most of the legislators here, even Joe, who we get along with, and he knows I'm running against him, great guy. You always are so condescending, both to the top law enforcement official in our county, the legislator in Montgomery, we're sure to others. You actually clarified one of the legislator Sada's comments for her without anybody. I mean, you are a very condescending, and there you go, you are the elected individual. So to then be condescending to somebody speaking in front of you is inappropriate, even if I'm being inappropriate myself, which I may do. So, I hope that in your caucus meetings in which no county, no government information is discussed, I hope that they tell you that you are really just condescending, you're rude, you're disrespectful, and it's really inappropriate. So, in fact, I wrote down some things that you said. You called our top law enforcement official silly. You kept calling him incorrect. You said it was irrational. You say a shocking ignorance. These are all very condescending things to speak of an elected official. Most of the statements he made were also mirrored by DA Tenby. Yet you focus, of course, politically on your opponent and on your party's opponent. So I do want to bring that up. Didn't plan to do it. It was really inappropriate. And I'm actually embarrassed for you and your smile and the way that you treat people. And I don't have that to say about anybody else here. I get along with most who I've talked to. I went to school with Legislator Goulden's daughter. I mean, I really don't have this. This is not a political partisan thing. It has to be called out because I don't think it's done enough. And I'm not the only person that thinks this, and certainly not because of my party or yours.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
My pleasure.
Okay, great. You know, it's really wild. You just can't stop. You know, you can't control yourself. And it's actually, you couldn't control yourself a couple other times. And I have friends in the sheriff's department who told me about the Tractor concert, which you know what I'm talking about. I'll help and I'll make sure we get things discussed. So back onto the actual substance of this meeting, in which one of your legislators can't stop responding like condescending. It is important that it's made up not of Democrats or Republicans or conservatives or working families, just people in the community. Because there are amendments that have been made, there are local laws that have been made, which have been made without the most forethought. Not necessarily by all the members here, but by this legislature. For example, our county planner used to be required to have a planning degree. That is no longer the case. To me, that is foolish. That is not a critique of any individuals here, but that is something that cannot be introspectively looked at. I don't think appropriate. So, while there is more meeting, we voted here tonight. It was too late, even though it's our first public comment in person. I did want to bring up that it should not be the legislative body who's voting on the final to be the only people. In fact, Legislator Sullivan, you mentioned that it's akin to the Constitution. Yeah, when Constitution amendments are made, it's not voted on by Congress, by just the Senate and House. It goes to state legislatures to vote on. It goes to governors to vote on. Whereas here, the only vote is in this room. And so it's not akin to the Constitution that way. And I do think it's inappropriate how that process has been brought up. Thank you very much. Like I said, brings most of you a big one.
Thank you. Anyone else? Moving on to recognition of legislators. Any legislator wishing to speak this evening? Is he recognized? Legislator Goulden.
Thank you, Chairwoman. It's been a long year and a half. I'm glad to be here with my colleagues and actually in a room and not on a phone meeting or a Zoom meeting or some meeting of that nature. That's a positive thing that we're moving forward in that type of way. We're going into the summer. Summer is here, actually. Be safe. We have a lot of bodies of water in our county. Be safe. There's always incidents out there. Just take care of yourself. Enjoy your summer. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just like to speak for myself. I know Legislator Sullivan was clarifying my points or trying to make my points for the public's understanding, and maybe I could further that in case it was misrepresented. My votes on the charter changes and the county laws were not the details of the actual laws, but because of the process. In other counties, they actually specifically call for no appointee to their commissions shall be a county employee or elected official at the time that they serve on the commissions. I've read a lot about what other counties are doing, and as I believe Legislator Sullivan and Legislator Sage said, we only do this once every 10 years. You know, it is a living document. We make changes here and there, but our overall, change of it and creating a commission, the purpose of that is to include the public. And I'm sorry we weren't able to do that. You know, and as Chairwoman Anisio said, you know, it's the process, but we don't know what the process is. That's my point here. We don't know when the meetings were, where these 3 local laws were discussed, and we don't have any minutes. And I appreciate that now we have, because I asked for a schedule of meetings. So, with that, I would just like to say I do have some good news. I'm happy to announce a grant for the senior center in Phillipstown. Our assembly member, my Democratic colleague, Sandy Galick, has secured the $250,000 that we've long awaited for from the Dormitory Authority. These state funds will help to alleviate the enormous local burden that the lease and the rehab of the former Leahy Pavilion puts on local taxpayers. So we pay a lot of money in rent. I think it's $11,000 a month for our local senior center. And I'm happy to announce this $250,000 that we've been waiting for. And on a sad note, I would like to talk about the drowning off of Little Stony Point in my district last week, which was horrific. I'm grateful to the firefighters and the fire companies who responded with the same professionalism and compassion they always bring to a scene. When we sent our boats back, we also sent onboard infrared cameras back to the state, which we got for free. That equipment would have been helpful in recovering a victim, but here we are. Who recovered the victim? 7 teenage girls found her on the shores of Putnam County. So tragedy upon tragedy upon trauma. The greater impact, I would argue, will be in every day. On busy weekends, who will conduct the day-to-day Marine Patrol speed checks, safe operation checks, who will deal with motor driving under the influence. These are not the jobs of our fire companies. These are law enforcement responsibilities. And Putnam County has just walked away from its responsibility on the Hudson River. I fought hard to keep the Marine Patrol intact. I fought hard to not have it dismantled. One thing I know is a fact, despite the press release that was issued by the Bureau of Emergency Services, which was very misleading, the call time would have been very different. We would have had a boat in the water. There was a sheriff on patrol that was trained, extensively trained. Unlike our volunteers, our sheriffs have a lot more training in marine patrol and safety than our very dedicated volunteers in the fire departments. We would have had a boat in the water. It would have been within minutes of Little Stony Point. There would have been an extra set of eyes on the water. There was no police boat on the water that evening of the drowning. I'm an EMT. I know that time matters. I'm a trained EMT. I'm sorry, I'm not an EMT currently, but time matters. And the proximity of the boat that we would have had on the Hudson and the sheriffs in the area would have made all the difference. Despite what you have read from the very misleading Bureau of Emergency Services press release, which it's unfortunate that we paid someone an extra $50,000 this year to write press releases, but we eliminated a Marine unit that cost us last year $65,000, and we were reimbursed for half of that by the state. But we do pay someone $50,000 a year to write our press releases and to watch Governor Cuomo's updates on Facebook. Thank you.
Are you saying the sheriff's office would have prevented the drowning?
The sheriff's office would have provided extra eyes on the river.
Okay.
To recover.
It made it sound like they would have prevented it.
Could have. You don't know. Do you know that?
Well, you're implying that they would.
No, I said an extra set of eyes would have been on the water. I didn't say to prevent the
First time
drowning.
around.
We'll go back to the recording. An extra set of eyes on the river when somebody is drowning could be a matter of life and death.
I think there were 19 responding agencies, if that was correct in the press release.
And nobody to investigate the incident.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Because there were no sheriff's boats and no police boats. I know that.
We're going back and forth now.
I do know that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else?
With inside
Anyone
information.
else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wishing to speak?
Want to foil my text?
Inside
Yes. Legislator Albano.
Yeah, with regard to the sheriff's Marine Patrol, I just saw no information, no documentation that supported having it there, and I asked for that, and I saw no justification.
Well, now you have it.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Somebody's dead.
No, that's not accurate. Please, accidents happen. It has nothing to do with that. That's my opinion. As far as the charter, you say once every 10 years. Again, it's a living document. If anyone has recommendations or would like changes to be made, we welcome it. Come to our committee meetings, send us a letter. It's open. This isn't closed. It's not every 10 years. And again, we discussed this at committee meetings. So to say it's not discussed, nobody knows about it, nobody was invited, yes, everyone's invited, it's out there. Let me say now, if anybody has a suggestion, please come forward, we welcome it. And we can change it at any time, and it's a matter of 9 legislators voting on it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Legislator Sullivan.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I would like to address the chairman of the Democratic Party who was here, Scott Ring, and his comments that I am being condescending. I was not being condescending. I think he was being condescending to me as a legislature. When we are here having meetings, we expect decorum and professionalism, and I was reading comments that I have prepared to the sheriff, not to the sheriff is a Democrat, so it makes sense that the chair of the Democratic Party would come up here and make political, condescending comments to a legislature and to us. I had not made any to him, so I don't know what his anger towards me is. And I'm just here to say we're all glad to be back, working together, moving forward. And if someone makes comments that are not true, as the sheriff did, I am going to bring them up. If anybody else makes comments that are not true, I will mention them. I'm not being condescending to anyone, and I don't know why Mr. Ring had to come up here and act that way towards me, because I did nothing to him to warrant that. I hope everybody has a good night, and I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm sorry to bring it up, but it came up again. As far as caucus, for some reason it comes up at every other meeting, kind of implying that maybe we're doing something wrong. It's a common practice. It's done everywhere. It's the way politics works. Political parties are allowed to caucus, sit down and speak. To imply that possibly county business or anything irregular or improper is being done is not fair to us, and it shouldn't be brought up at any meeting. We act appropriately, just as every other caucus possibly has acted in the past, and I believe we do things correctly. So, I just don't want to hear it no more, because it constantly gives the implication that something is wrong, asking us to answer to that. We do what is correct. I can tell you I do what is correct, and I believe one of my colleagues do too. I haven't seen anything different. So I think we should end that.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond. This is Legislator Montgomery.
I just want to see if anyone else wants to speak, because we want to go around with recognition of legislators. Anybody else?
I just want to say that the legislature, it's an honor to represent my district. I think we're all here because we want to do the business of Putnam County to the best of our abilities, and I believe that every single one of you. I just want to read one more prayer and it's called Prayer for Common Ground. Today, may I be open to others' ideas and beliefs, respectful of our differences, not threatened by them. May I grow in understanding of my own motives, knowing that people often act out of their own fears. May I be a force for replacing fear with insight, helping us all to be patient and kind as we talk. Strength, real strength, can always find compromise. Working together, may we find a common ground, enable us to move forward with a shared purpose, serve the people of Putnam County. May we see what is truly important and unites us, focusing on that, to banish roadblocks of ego and fear. Today, may I be open to others' ideas and beliefs. And also, I'd like to just make one more comment, is that we all remember what's important. Hopefully are at the tail end of our pandemic, and we lost a lot of really good people. We have people now that are sick and going through cancer treatments, and the world continues to turn regardless of our differences. And I'm encouraged by the work before us, and I think we can always work together for the common good of Putnam County.
Thank you. I'm also glad that we are finally here this evening to meet in person. Looking back, we have faced unprecedented times. 15 months of lockdown. has taken its toll on many, many people. In fact, 33% of Americans reported mental health symptoms related to COVID-19. We have faced emotional and physical health problems, burnout, fear, isolation, and financial pressure. Moving forward, I believe we are moving in the right direction. Schools will be opening for all the students in September. No doubt we'll be facing a mental health crisis. Fortunately, the U.S. American Rescue Plan includes $4 billion for mental health and substance abuse services. I want to wish everyone a safe and healthy summer.
I'd like to respond to Legislator Albano's comments about
Legislator,
the-
yes,
and,
Legislator Montgomery.
and speaking of roadblocks that Legislator Sage so eloquently put out in the prayer. You know, it's a great wish to want to work together, and I hope that you will acknowledge Legislator Sage, the 2 memos 2 months in a row where I requested to, as chair of the Health Committee, to put the New York Health Act on the agenda to discuss. I didn't say I was in favor of it or against it. I had constituents who wanted to hear from experts regarding. So there was no response from you other than a complete no. No reason why my request for agenda items could be on the agenda. And to speak to Legislator Albano's point about the caucus, there's a difference between an implication and a question. I ask questions. I don't imply. If you feel that my questions imply you're doing something, county business behind closed doors, that's on you. My question is simply, before each meeting, did you discuss county business in your caucus? I don't know why I can't get an answer to that.
Your question is, did we do something wrong? And I think that's important.
I don't believe I asked you to do something wrong.
Yes,
When did I ask, did you do something wrong?
okay, that was your question. Did
No.
you discuss county business?
Did you do?
Okay, we can go back and
All
forth
right,
a lot on
motion
this.
to-
We really should, but let's end this on a good note.
Yeah.
Safe, healthy, and happy summer. Or I say July. For July, okay. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.